For any small or medium-sized business, a new hire is a massive deal. It's a huge investment of hope, time, and of course, money. But what happens when that investment goes totally wrong? Today, we're diving into a really powerful story about how just one single hiring mistake can have devastating consequences and the crucial lesson that was learned from it. And this isn't just some catchy phrase. For a lot of business owners, this is a painful reality. It's really the core theme of our story today, a pretty stark warning that just assuming someone is competent can put everything you've worked so hard to build at risk. Okay, so let's get right into this cautionary tale. It's a personal and very costly experience, told from the perspective of a business owner who really, truly thought they had found the perfect person to help them grow. And look, this candidate, they seemed perfect. This wasn't some careless hire. The business was looking for a construction supervisor, and this person just ticked all the boxes. We're talking over 2 decades of experience, the right project background, and in the interview, incredibly confident. He could walk them through the entire process, step by step. On paper, he was absolutely flawless.
Can you just imagine the relief? I mean, for small business, finding someone who looks this good, it feels like you've hit the jackpot. They weren't just hiring an employee. They genuinely believed they were hiring a cornerstone for all their future projects.
And then reality came crashing in. That initial belief, that amazing feeling of having found the perfect person, it was completely, utterly wrong. The dream hire very quickly turned into an absolute nightmare. So let's break down what actually happened when their assumptions met the hard wall of reality. The real cost of incompetence started to show itself, and let me tell you, it happened fast. Within just a few weeks, the first massive red flag appeared. The supervisor couldn't interpret a Gantt chart. Now, if you're outside the construction world, that might not sound like a huge deal. But in that industry, that's like hiring a taxi driver who can't read a map. It is a fundamental, non-negotiable skill for planning and execution. And this one single gap in his skills created a huge domino effect. Because he couldn't handle this one core task, everything else started to crumble. Tasks weren't coordinated properly, which meant deadlines were misunderstood, decisions got delayed, and the whole project just started to stall. And guess who had to jump in and fix everything? Yep, the owner. But here's the thing. The real cost wasn't just a delayed project. It was the lost opportunity. For a small business with no real financial buffer or extra staff, having the owners get pulled back into daily firefighting meant they couldn't focus on what they should have been doing, finding new clients, growing the company. The business itself just stopped moving forward. Well, this whole experience forced a moment of really serious reflection. It would have been so easy to just blame the employee, right? But they realized the problem was much deeper than that. It was time to take a hard look at their own process. And they started asking themselves this really powerful question. Yeah, the supervisor was incompetent, but who hired him? Who put him in that position in the first place? They had this epiphany that the ultimate responsibility was with them and with their flawed assumptions about what actually makes a good employee. And this really gets to the heart of the whole problem. They had relied on all the usual things, a great-looking resume, confident answers in an interview, all those years of experience. But what did none of that confirm? Whether he could do their specific work in their specific environment. They had just assumed that experience automatically equaled competence. So they made a really deliberate choice. Stop assuming and start verifying. This led them to completely overhaul their entire hiring process, shifting away from assumptions and towards hard, cold evidence. And here's what they built. First, the owners took back control of recruitment. They personally wrote down the exact skills needed for the job. Then, and this is the game changer, instead of just talking, they had candidates perform real tasks that they'd be expected to do on the job. And crucially, they watched how candidates behaved and what their attitude was like during these practical tests, not just how they sounded in an interview. So, was this new process longer? You bet. Was it more difficult? Absolutely. But as the owner put it, this necessary pain was an investment. It was a short-term difficulty that was specifically designed to prevent that long-term, catastrophic pain of making another bad hire. So the big question is, did it actually work? Well, the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. Let's take a look at the tangible results of this new competence-first approach. The results were, frankly, transformative. Employee performance became predictable and reliable. The owners could finally get back to focusing on growing the business.
And the company didn't just stabilize, it started winning awards. And here's the ultimate validation. Elements of their system were actually adapted by a Malaysian government authority to assess construction personnel across the whole country. I mean, that is incredible proof of concept. So, what's the one single powerful lesson we can take away from this whole journey? Well, it all boils down to a new mantra: verify, don't assume. This led to a really simple but profound shift in how they thought. The old, and as it turns out insufficient question was, are you experienced? The new and far more relevant question is, can you prove to me that you can perform the required tasks to our standards consistently? And this brings us to the final crucial takeaway. Rule number 1. Competence cannot be inferred. You can't just guess it from a resume or a confident interview. It doesn't work. Rule number 2, it has to be defined and assessed. You have to know exactly what skills you're looking for, and you have to test for them directly. And the final and most important rule of all, it must be verified. You have to see it with your own eyes before you make that critical hiring decision. Which really just leaves us with this one final question to think about. In your own work, in your own business, is the risk of a bad hire just being left to chance and assumption? Or are you managing that risk deliberately by demanding evidence of competence? The answer to that question could truly be the difference between stagnation and success.